Order. Order. Nikki Aiken to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I beg to move that this House has considered World Book Day. Tomorrow, the 7th of March, will mark World Book Day 2024, the day when we reflect on the importance of reading and literature for people of all ages and encourage especially the younger generations to embrace reading. World Book Day was created by UNESCO in 1995 as a worldwide celebration of books and reading. This is now an occasion marked in over 100 companies across the globe each year. World Book founder Baroness Gail Rebuck explained the reasoning behind the idea as follows. We wanted to do something to reposition reading, and our message is the same today as it was then, that reading is fun, relevant, accessible, exciting, and has the power to transform lives. And I couldn't agree more. Mr Chairman, as we celebrate World Book Day, once again, I find myself often in conversation with friends and colleagues about our favourite books and authors which have inspired and influenced our lives. My own first personal memories of reading include Enid Blyton's Famous Five, followed by Nancy Drew series and the Hardy Boys. And I think my love of crime and mystery novels has been built on both Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Possibly my favourite novel growing up was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And it was a delight to introduce my own daughter to the novel when she was younger, and she equally loved it. And in my late teens, studying A-level English, I was introduced to Thomas Hardy, and particularly his Return of the Native novel, which included the most fascinating and mysterious character, Eustace Vai. I have read so many Harvey novels since, and I've always been taken by the complex characters and relationships between men and women that he wrote about. During my 20s, I read most of Margaret Atwood's collection of novels, and perhaps one of my top 5 favourite novels of all time is her Blind Assassin. My love of reading has continued throughout my life, and I've enjoyed writers such as Pat Barker, Sebastian Faulk, and Ian McEwan, whose Atonement novel also makes it into my top 5. Mr Chairman, in the UK, we have been blessed over centuries to have some of the most world-renowned authors who readers still enjoy today, from Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, C.S. Lewis, Virginia Woolf, and of course, the outstanding J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling has probably done more to introduce children and encourage children to read books through her Harry Potter series than any other author known. And I think we should pay tribute for her outstanding contribution to encouraging children to read and to the publishing industry in this country. Mr Chairman, my constituency, the cities of London and Westminster, is blessed with a rich literacy history. Arthur Conan Doyle's legendary Sherlock Holmes was based at the iconic 221B Baker Street in my constituency. Other famous novels, including Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which is set in numerous places across the two cities, including Bond Street, Victoria, Green Park and St James's Park, and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, whose characters lived in Soho. And, Mr Chairman, the Palace of Westminster has been the setting for many a novel, including, and you may think this, but I couldn't possibly comment, including Michael Dobbs' House of Cards. And just across Parliament Square, in our great Westminster Abbey, lay a plethora of British authors and poets, including Geoffrey Chaucer, Thomas Hardy, Rudyard Kipling, and Alfred Tennyson, to name a few. Mr Chairman, I could speak for the full 90 minutes around the vast wealth of legendary authors and books set in my constituency and from the rest of the world, but we must concentrate on celebrating World Book Day first. It is important to remember the joy of reading can be accessed for free. So whatever your economic background, children and adults alike can borrow books from libraries across the United Kingdom. I will, of course.
Well, can I welcome the Honourable Lady's debate on World Book Day, which I very much support. On Friday, I'll be visiting schools in my own constituency to celebrate this, and I'm delighted that Stafford libraries are so popular and well used. But also I'd like to pay tribute to HarperCollins and the Publishers Association, who arranged for 50 books to be delivered to every single primary school in my constituency for World Book Day. So I'm very keen to get Stafford reading and very keen to support this campaign.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. She's absolutely right that we must all work together to ensure that children are open to reading, are introduced to reading at an early age. We are fortunate in the cities of London and Westminster to be home to some amazing libraries, such as Pimlico, Victoria and the Barbican Children's Library. In total, there are more than 15 libraries for public use across the two cities. As local authorities' budgets become tighter and with household incomes being squeezed, I don't think it has ever been more important to protect our libraries. Libraries not only offer a diverse range of books, but also act as an essential third place between home and school. This is particularly beneficial for children who live in overcrowded homes and need a quiet place to do their homework. Mr Chairman, yesterday I jointly hosted the World Book Day parliamentary drop-in with the Honourable Member for Northampton South. It was an amazing day and I thank all the MPs who did turn up and could collect books for their schools. According to World Book Day, reading for pleasure is the single biggest indicator of a child's future success, more so than parents' educational backgrounds or their income. That is why it's so important to support initiatives like World Book Day. Last year alone, the organisation provided 50 million £1 book tokens to children in the UK. Children across my constituency benefited from these and will do so again this year, and I look forward to visiting a number of schools over the next couple of days to hand out book tokens. Mr Chairman, according to World Book Day research, when asked, a staggering 1 in 7 pupils stated the book they purchased with the token they were given was the first book they had ever bought. For those receiving free school meals, the figure climbs to 1 in 5 pupils. And also according to World Book Day's research, reading for pleasure is at its lowest since 2005. And we must all work together, whatever our political party, to reverse this trend. I am very, very proud that the Conservative government since 2010 has made improving children's literacy a major priority, and results are paying off. The most recent OECD PISA international literacy tables saw the UK climb from 25th in 2009 to 13th in the 2022 rankings. I fully support the government's reading framework designed to increase the focus on reading for school children. And moreover, the Department of Education's investing an extra £24 million to support children's literacy skills over the past year, to help pupils' recovery from the pandemic and work towards achieving the target of 90% of primary school pupils reaching the expected standard in literacy and numeracy. Of course I will.
Can I thank my honourable friend for securing this debate and the powerful message she's sending. I think World Book Day's theme of encouraging reading for fun, and particularly with 2 9- and 11-year-old boys myself, I know that is a real challenge. But she rightly points to the increase in literacy levels amongst young people under this government. I think it's one of our proudest achievements, and it wouldn't have happened without the emphasis on phonics and the core skills that unlock that independence of mind and that creative thinking that goes into reading for fun.
I thank my right honourable friend for his intervention, and he's absolutely right. And the fact that the current Secretary of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, when he was Education Secretary, really made the emphasis on that, working with his ministerial team, and I think the results are paying off. Mr Chairman, World Book Day research has also shown that reading with a parent is the single biggest determinant on whether a child will read independently. And I think that some of the most important memories I have, one of the happiest memories I have of my children growing up, was reading with them. Of course, they read Harry Potter, but my son was also, when he was very little, obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine, and my daughter, I think, read every single Jacqueline Wilson book. And for a child to be able to read with their parent, the parent needs to be a proficient reader themselves. And so, Madam Chairman, that is one reason why improving adult literacy rates is also important. According to the National Literacy Trust in England, 16.4% of adults, or just over 7 million people, can be described as having a very poor literacy skill. This has wide-reaching implications and it is, I think, extremely worrying. And on average, an adult with very poor literacy skills will earn 7% less than if they had a basic level of literacy. These issues not just impact the person's feeling of confidence and ability to be part of society, also affects their income generation, the fact that the type of job they can get. And indeed, research from the National Literacy Trust has shown that there is a correlation between literacy rates and life expectancy. For example, a boy born in a ward with some of the greatest literacy challenges will live 26 years shorter than a boy born in a ward with some of the fewest literacy challenges. We must work together to ensure that all adults have access to educational resources throughout their lives, and particularly when they are perhaps in their 30s and 40s and maybe realising that they do need to improve their literacy. Organisations such as the Reading Agency and the Adult Literacy Trust provide a number of free resources to help improve adult reading skills. And the government is also doing its bit to reduce adult illiteracy rates. The Department of Education's Essential Skills Entitlement provides the opportunity of free study for adults who do not have essential literacy skills. Mr. Chairman, I have to say that when I finished university and I was looking for a job, I volunteered. And I volunteered to teach people who just arrived in this country, really, to read. And I will never forget the most amazing Somalian woman who was so eloquent and wanted to learn to read to help her children. And it was the most humbling experience of my life to see the passion that this woman had for learning to read. And I really do hope that she was able to go on and help and support her children and also support herself. Mr. Chairman, not only are books invaluable for their positive impacts on readers, but they also play a vital part in our economy. Across the UK, there are over 1,000 bookstores, and the publishing industry is worth £7 billion a year to the UK economy. And I do hope that following the excellent budget that the Chancellor has just announced, that publishing industry will even be able to grow their economy with a number of the initiatives that the Chancellor has announced today. Mr. Chairman, it would be remiss of me in a debate focusing on reading, not to mention the Publishers Association, the member organisation representing companies of all sizes involved in publishing in this country. I have worked closely with them since entering Parliament. I set up with them the Conservative Women's MPs Book Club. And I think my honourable friend is a member of that book club. I'm sure you and I are probably the only ones who are able to join it in this debate today because we are women and we're Conservatives. But I would say that it has really been a most joyous time bringing Conservative MPs from all intakes to talk about a book and really enjoy fiction again. And some of the MPs involved have said to me it's the first time they've read a fiction book, since entering Parliament. And it's so important that we put aside our time to read books for our health and well-being. I have also worked closely with the Publishers Association to establish our summer reading list for parliamentarians. And I want to thank the MPs and peers who have given us their favourite book recommendations over the last few years. Last summer, my choice was Hitler, Stalin, Mum and Dad by Danny Finkelstein. And I hope that everyone in this debate today will provide us with their summer reading choice this year. Mr. Chairman, we all have a part to play in supporting World Book Day and encouraging everyone, no matter what their age, to pick up a book. I know I will be doing just that when I visit the schools in my constituency later this week. Sometimes it really can be as simple as one book can change someone's entire life for good.
The question is that this House has considered World Book Day. Jim Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, and a pleasure, first of all, to serve under your chairship, and very pleased that I can make a contribution. Can I first of all thank the Honourable Lady for London and Westminster for bringing this issue to Westminster Hall today. I was just sitting there thinking to myself, I don't think there's been a debate that the Honourable Lady has had in Westminster Hall that I haven't managed to attend and support her, because I love to do that, Mr. Chairman. That's what part of it, I believe, my task in this place to do as well. I declare a very clear interest as a book lover. For me, it's probably biographies, probably more than anything else. I love reading those types of stories. I like to hear about the lives of people, men and women, and what they do, and those who have changed the world and those who have sought to change the world in many ways, to get an understanding of what made some of the great men and women of history tick and do the things that they did. One of my absolute favourite biographies, and the Honourable Lady has referred to some of hers and her children's as well, is the one in Blair, Maine, or Paddy, Maine as we know him, the local Newtownards boy who founded the SAS and whom I still believe was robbed of his Victoria Cross. Now, that story was transferred from a book to TV. And just for the record, Mr. Chairman, he didn't swear like a trooper. The fact is, in his real life, he was quite careful with his word, and he might have got angry. He used his fists on many occasions, and that was fairly obvious in the TV programme. But he didn't use the language that was portrayed on the TV programmes. His family are very clear about that, and the people of Newtownards are very clear about that as well. Just in the last few weeks, I read another. I did something maybe slightly different. Dan Walker, most people will know Dan Walker. He used to be on BBC as a commentator and early BBC News in the morning, and then he's also a commentator for sports programmes as well. He wrote a number of books, but I got a chance to read one of his books, and he told some of the stories of where he, as a BBC journalist, was in the world and where it happened, and he was there for the World Games. He was there whenever, after the arena bomb took place. He was there in South Africa, places where he was. It's almost, forgive me for the analogy, Mr. Chairman, almost like that Forrest Gump programme or TV programme where he seemed to be everywhere where something happened. Well, Dan Walker actually was there where all those things were happening, and his interpretation of those occasions where people, and it wasn't about him, it was about the people. And again, it's a lovely story, and I would encourage everyone, if they get a chance, to read his books. When my boys were younger, Mr. Chairman, we used to go on holidays, and very quickly the boys grow up and they don't want to go on holidays with their mum and dad anymore. But I could have read perhaps I genuinely could have read 5 or 6 books twice away. And the ability to put your busy mind somewhere else is just phenomenal. And I know the Honourable Lady, when she introduced her contribution, it's quite clear to me, listening to the Honourable Lady, that reading books helps her, and helps us all, I believe, to transport ourselves to a different place. And the world is open to anyone through a book. It's just wonderful, and that is why I love to see World Book Day coming round. And yesterday, the World Book Day was in PCH in here, and it was lovely, as I do every year, to go and support them. But this year, Mr. Chairman, they were in the Boothroyd room, I think it was. It's much bigger one, and room R or room S or room U, or sometimes it might be. So it tells me, Mr. Chairman, that World Book Day is expanding. And it's expanding because they used at least half the room of the Boothroyd room, and what an exercise that was in how to promote books amongst children. I'd take some of those half a dozen books that they give me to one of my schools, all being well, maybe next week or certainly the week after, and give them to some of the children at the primary schools, and hope that they will be use them as well. So I love to see pictures of children dressed up as their favourite characters, whether that be a Disney princess or 2 Marvel heroes, from bananas and pyjamas to the Toad of Toad Hall, from characters from the Bible to war heroes like Blair, Maine, who's always was my hero as a young boy in Ballywalter and in Newtownards whenever I was back in the 60s and the early 70s. World Book Day is a day to encourage children to immerse themselves in the world of reading and escape sometimes from the world they live in and try to travel elsewhere. One of my local primary schools, Victoria Primary School in particular, are doing an initiative this year whereby you wrap up one of your books and swap it with someone in your class. And I just thought that's a fantastic idea. You read your book and you give that book to someone else, and then they give you their book in return. And all of a sudden you can have your knowledge through those books can become greater and even more avid. My parliamentary aide is an avid reader. The fact of the matter, Mr. Chairman, is she must be to read up on every topic that I give her to speak on, you know, to be honest. So obviously her encyclopedia of knowledge is much greater than perhaps, with great respect, many others, people who do speech writing as well. She has passed this joy on to her children. And indeed this year Santa brought the children, the two girls, a bookcase with books on it from their room, for their rooms. Every Saturday morning they go with their granddad to the library, which conveniently has a park beside it, and the staff there watch their wee dog whilst they get their new book. So every Saturday with their grandpa they're down at the library to get a new book. So what an insatiable desire to read. When they go into school, the school has a rewards programme where they get progress from belt to belt until they end up with a black belt in reading. Not a black belt in judo, a black belt in reading, because of progress for all the books that they do. Again, it's been encouraging. I suppose I'm telling these stories not to boast about anything, because that's not what the idea is. It's to explain what schools are doing in my area to progress reading. All of these things make it interesting for children to get engaged. However, the fact of the matter is that literacy is a challenge that has to be met face on, and for that schools need funding. I'm very pleased to see the Minister in his place. I know he hasn't any responsibility for Northern Ireland. I'm going to tell some stories about Northern Ireland, by the way. I've told some about the schools, but I want to tell something because what we have done. And all I think I wish to do through this debate is encourage people, and I think that's what I wish to do. I wish to encourage the Minister in the importance of reading. I want to encourage the two shadow ministers as well. I know they'll encourage me in return, as you will, Minister, in your response to the questions that all of us asked. It's great for these children to have grandparents who can take them to the library, or a dad who has the time to read to them before bed each night. But this is not a scene that is replicated everywhere, and that's maybe the issue. And that is why we have many children in reading recovery as schools attempt to fill the breach and help children attain not an average level of reading, but improve them from where they are in an easier way. So there's a real duty, a real interest in. I think we're very blessed, Mr. Chairman, to have so many teachers who have a chosen vocation to educate children and make them better. And everyone who is here are those who advocate that as well. And in particular, if I can say, the honourable gentleman who has just arrived in. Now, this reading recovery needs a teacher, not needs funding. And today, in the gentlest of ways, I would remind the Minister and others in this room that our reading levels are largely based on the funding that schools can access for children. So, so the funding that you give for your books, I think the other day there was I can't remember who it was in Westminster Hall, made the comment about some schools that don't have a library at all. I was quite amazed at that. I never thought that any school hadn't got a library, but I think it's really important that they do have. So to give those on free school dinners, book tokens, to pay for a teacher dedicated to helping the concepts of reading, and to encourage others to be more passionate. This can only be done if the prioritisation, if the focus of if the demand, if the drive is right here. Thankfully, Mr. Chairman, and I'm coming near the end of my contribution, Northern Ireland is ranked 5th in the world for reading proficiency amongst primary school children. Data from the 2021 Progress in International Reading Literacy Study reveals that children from Northern Ireland significantly outperformed those in 52 of the 56 participating countries. So I'm very proud to be able to be here today and tell others about what we do in Northern Ireland, and what our schools do, and what our education system does, and what our parents do as well. And this is something that we can be very proud of on World Book Day. But we can't be complacent either. There are still children who can't read well, children who struggle, and children who have no enjoyment. And the fun of World Book Day is, I believe, a time to focus on all of this, as we do here today, collectively and singularly, and attempt to do better. When it comes to reading, I always, if I can, Mr. Chairman, try to leave a quotation, and my quotation is from my favourite book in the whole world, the Bible, and it's Proverbs 22, verses 6, Mr. Chairman. Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. So what are we doing about our children through books? We're teaching them about the world. We're teaching them about life. We're teaching them about social engagement. We're teaching them how they can be great adults in a world that perhaps maybe seems incredibly strange. And for some, it may even be a world where they're not sure if it's a world that they want to be in. So if we give our children a love of books, this is something that will stand them in good stead for the rest of their lives. And this, to me, Mr. Chairman, is a definite priority, and one that we should all try collectively to achieve. Thank you so much.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. It's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend in terms of securing this debate. And it's something that I think we all feel very passionate about, because we all understand how important reading is to our children. And one of the most precious things that we do is having the opportunity to sit down with our child and read them a book. But sadly, while that occurs up and down households right across the country so often, it doesn't happen in all households. And we've got to be acutely aware of that. A recent Book Trust survey found that of 2,000 low-income families, less than half of children under 7 are being read a bedtime story. And this is one of the very simple acts that can really transform the outcomes of a child, making sure that they really develop and widen their range and their vocabulary, that early language development, which is actually so incredibly critical for their outcomes later on in life, and not just perversely in English, but in other subjects such as maths and science as well. And so this is why World Book Day is so incredibly important, because it is an opportunity, it is a moment in order to put a real focus for every child right across the country in terms of the importance of a book. And I think that the scheme that the Publishers Association have really championed over these years is something that we should all feel a great sense of pride of, because it's not just about what they're doing in schools and for children, but it's also a celebration of the fact that Britain is a world-leading nation in publishing. We have some of the best companies in the world based here in the United Kingdom. It employs so many people right across the United Kingdom, but also because the publishing industry heart is here in the United Kingdom. It means that we have an amazing stream of talented authors that actually have the opportunity to get their works published. Indeed, there are many parliamentarians that think they are talented authors as well, that like to take up the opportunity. I'm not sure... I'm not sure. I think the book sales speak to it. But we're getting slightly distracted there. But what this does in terms of World Book Day is bring that focus. And actually, there are challenges that we do face. My honourable friend picked up on some of the real challenges on children from some of the most disadvantaged backgrounds about the fact that actually they aren't having access to a book. It's sad to think that so many households, there isn't a book in that household for that child to be in danger of picking it up, discovering a new world, having their eyes opened. And my honourable friend did a long list of authors from her constituency, and I'd just like to point out the great literary tradition that Staffordshire has provided in terms of Arnold Bennett. And in my own constituency, Arthur Conan Doyle, which she touched upon, was visited Great Worley as the Great Worley outrages, and Arthur Conan Doyle came to Great Worley and was a great champion to make sure that justice was done. So it wasn't just writing about it in the fictional characters that were meant to have walked the streets of her constituency, but it was actually delivering justice in Staffordshire.
Will my honourable friend
I'd be
give way?
delighted to.
Well, I absolutely agree with what my honourable friend and my neighbour in Staffordshire is saying, and I should add that Tolkien lived in my constituency and was based in Brockton in the World War, and that's why one of the reasons I'm very keen to promote literacy. But does he also agree with me how important it is that the UK continues to promote reading from the government, and does he welcome that recently Children in England now rank 4th globally for reading, and that we've actually gone up in the league tables from 8th to the top 5th, and isn't this fantastic news that we should be welcoming?
This is absolutely fantastic news, and I think it's a real testament to the work that's been done and the focus that we've had on reading in this country over the last 14 years, and we've got to continue to build on that. And she mentions Tolkien, and of course it is not necessarily widely known, but the Shire, which was in Lord of the Rings, was of course based on the Kinver rock houses in my constituency, and I would strongly encourage people to come and visit them. I noticed the Honourable Member for Worcester may be going to intervene and sort of disagree with me on this, but
I'd be delighted to intervene on congratulate him for the points he's making. I'd only say Worcestershire would certainly dispute the suggestion that the Shire was based in Staffordshire, and of course Tolkien enjoyed looking down from the Malvern Hills and comparing the black country, which may have been the inspiration for Mordor, with the green Shire below him.
I fear, Mr. Chairman, that this is something that isn't going to be resolved in this debate, but it is fair to say that I'm right and the Honourable Member for Worcester is wrong. Swiftly moving on. The Department for Education plays an incredibly important role in actually the promotion of World Book Day, working with the Publishers Association, working with schools, but of course creating the underpinning of making sure that we get our children reading. And we see amazing progress in children working up the PISA scales in terms of reading outcomes, in terms of the understanding of literature as part of our curriculum, and of course phonics. And I know this is something that is very close to my right honourable friend's heart, the Minister who has championed this along with many of us over the years. We know this actually delivers results, and we're actually seeing it in the tables internationally, and sadly we're not necessarily seeing the same results for every component part of the United Kingdom, and it's certainly something that in those parts of the United Kingdom that haven't embraced phonics as a central part of actually developing and promoting and teaching reading, it's certainly something that I would urge them to look at as a matter of some urgency. And I'd particularly like to welcome the intervention by the DFE on the £60 million English Hubs programme, very much focusing on designing and developing the expertise to teaching reading, because getting this right is critical, and it's something that we've probably a number of us have seen actually in this room, and getting the very best of teaching, encouraging that, developing that, but most importantly sharing it right across all of our schools is absolutely critical for all of our children. And it's already been touched upon, the issue of libraries. So important, making sure that children from right across the country always have access to a good library, the opportunity to pick up a good book, be transformed to a different world, a different country, or even Worcestershire, but anywhere where their imagination can take them with the support of that book. And the £20 million Libraries Improvement Fund is certainly welcome. But I would suggest that maybe we need to be looking at doing more in this area, because there are some concerning areas. We've seen library book stocks decrease by 11% across England, Wales and Scotland between 2021 and 2022. This is really the place that we need to be making sure that we're seeing the best possible range of stock in our libraries to make sure that youngsters have that opportunity, that when they've got that book that they've picked up from World Book Day, and when they've got that sort of enthusiasm, they're able to continue to feed that and they're able to continue to develop it. As I say, it's absolutely important. We thank all the people who've been instrumental in terms of creating the structure for World Book Day to happen. But also, we must thank all those teachers, teaching assistants, support staff, parents, and the children themselves that actually make World Book Day the living, wonderful, beautiful thing that it is. Thank you very much.
Please, Grant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard. I'm privileged to be able to take part in this debate today. I don't really understand why it's not better attended. I mean, it's not as if there's anything much else of interest going on anywhere else. Can I commend the Honourable Lady from the Cities of London and Westminster for bringing this debate and thank her for the contribution she made to the drop-in that we had with, on behalf of World Book Day. It's one of the events in the parliamentary calendar that I always try to put in an appearance at, because I think it is vitally important. And having seen the difference that is made in some of the primary schools in my constituency, which includes some very, very high levels of deprivation, and it might not seem that much that somebody gets given a £1 book token to spend on a book that they want, but if that £1 is the only £1 spare in your family budget for that month, then it can make a big, big difference. As so often happens in Westminster Hall, I haven't heard much that I would disagree with, maybe a bit, but not anything particularly significant. The honourable member from Strangford made a comment about schools without libraries, which is something that concerns us. I'll come back to that in a minute, because I've got one story about how a school library almost literally saved the life of somebody who has gone on to do great things in my constituency. Talking about libraries, I had the great sort of pleasure a few years ago of visiting Inverpeffray Library in Perthshire, Scotland's oldest free lending library. It opened in 1680. I think the first one in England was about 20 years before that. The oldest continuously operating library in the world, by the way, is in Fez in Morocco. It's been going since 859 AD. We sometimes forget how much of what we regard as Western civilization we owe to people who these days are not seen to be part of Western culture. The Honourable Lady reminisced on some of her own experience of reading, although I don't actually directly remember it myself. My mum and dad always used to reliably tell me that the first sentence that I learned to read was how they ran last time out, because my dear Granda Quinn taught me to read racing results before he became so ill that he couldn't read them for himself. That was when I was 3. I know that I was 3 because I'd originally learned to read from my pyjamas. I'd read pictures of cat and dog and so on them. And I know that it was when I was only 3, because I then learned to read, taught my big brother, who was 4, to read. And I must have done something right, because he eventually came out with an honours degree in chemical physics from Glasgow University and much else as well. So, you know, if you get well taught when you're young, there's no holding you back. I did meet my match, though, when I got married, because my wife, Fiona, was such an avid book reader that she once managed to not realise that the toast under the grill had gone on fire as she was standing next to it, because she was so engrossed in her book. She also caused consternation at the then Glenwood Library in Glenrothes in the days before computers. I don't know how many people are young enough to remember that. An ever-decreasing number, I think, when the library books were managed on wee card envelopes that you had to put the tab in. I see the Honourable Lady nodding. She obviously learned that in history at school. Fiona used to get 4 books out of the library in the morning, read them and take them back in the afternoon, which completely knackered the system, because the tickets were still in the issues and they weren't ready to be taken back in the returns. They came to a compromise that when she went in the morning and got books, they would leave her tickets to one side, because they knew she would be back in later in the day. Something else that, again, not that many members here will now remember, it was actually on my 15th birthday, the BBC started a programme called On the Move to encourage adult literacy, and a big part of it was trying to get people, adults, who either couldn't read or weren't confident in their ability to read, to learn that it wasn't something to be ashamed of. If for whatever reason they hadn't had the chance to learn to read adequately in their childhood, they would be given the chance in adulthood. That programme actually launched the careers of people like Bob Hoskins and Martin Shaw. Those who have seen it, when they see the wee logo that went with it, although you might not be able to describe it just now, they will recognise it immediately. My uncle Alec Mackenzie designed that wee logo for BBC on the move. He has never yet received a single penny in royalties for it, but he did it for love of adult education. The honourable member suggested that we all sort of chip in our nominations for a summer reading list. I notice no one else has risen to the challenge. I'm going to suggest a book called On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. And it was actually it wasn't a World Book Day, it was a summer reading event in Parliament a few years ago that it was recommended to me. And one of the volunteers asked me what kind of books I usually read. I went and picked this out. It's the story of a young black inner city American girl who is a very talented rapper. The only word in there that I would identify at all is young, and that was quite a long time ago. So I said, that's not what I usually read. And the volunteer said, exactly. And I think it's something that's very important, is sometimes if we encourage ourselves and encourage others to read something completely different. People say travel broadens the mind, but reading can broaden the mind a great deal without having to travel very far. Since then, I often make a point of trying to read about things that I think I'm not interested in, just to see if I become interested in them. But we all like to go home sometimes, so I still love finding books by Val McDermid, a great Fife author, Ian Rankin, brought up in Cardendale, my constituency, or Sarah Sheridan, some of her Scottish books. The two books that are falling apart on my bookshelf because they've been read so often are Yes Minister, before I got interested in politics, by the way, and a book called Hamish's Mountain Walk that was written again by another person with a long association with Fife. I used to teach in a school in Buckhaven. The first person to do a continuous non-powered journey across all 278 Munro Mountains in Scotland, and Hamish's Mountain Walk was a bit of it. There's a lot more in it than just mountain walking, and there's a phrase in there that I've always remembered. He's encouraging people not just to walk up and down a hill, or not just to cycle around a road, but to try and take in as much of what they're passing through as possible. And his phrase is, any book can be ordered from your local library, and a whole world of vicarious fun lies close to hand. That's as true today as it was when Hamish wrote those words almost 50 years, in fact almost exactly 50 years ago. The difficulty is that sometimes local libraries are not that local anymore because so many of them have been closed, so many of them are being restricted in their opening hours and so on. That is very sad. Basically, although local authorities, certainly in Scotland and I think elsewhere in the UK, have to provide for library services, there isn't a minimum standard of provision. There isn't a statutory inspection system in the way that it would be for policing or education or social work. And inevitably, when councils get squeezed, if they want to avoid actually going bankrupt, they have to keep providing the services that have a required standard of provision. And sadly, the things that are not an absolute legal requirement are the things that start to suffer. And it often means that cultural services, library services and so on are the first to suffer. And that is sad because the earlier that children learn to read for themselves, I mean, getting read bedtime stories by an adult, a parent or another adult is a great thing. But the earlier that children learn to start reading for themselves, the quicker they'll learn to start thinking for themselves. And that is vitally important. And it's something that modern society seems determined to stamp out. People are not encouraged to think for themselves enough. Reading a book allows you to do that. I've actually seen some evidence that children who read a lot of fiction, regardless of whether it's worthy fiction or trashy fiction in the eyes of middle-class folk like us, children who read a lot of fiction and as children are less likely to be psychopaths when they grow up. And I mean actually sort of clinically diagnosed psychopaths rather than using it in its kind of slang term. And it seems to be because when you read fiction, you have to put yourself into the position of somebody else. You can't read a book of fiction without putting yourself into the shoes of one or more of the characters. So children learn to be empathetic simply by reading what looks to be just a story about spacemen or ballet dancers or whatever it was. I don't know if the honourable gentleman wanted to give up. Give way.
You make a really important point, and it was interesting, some of the statistics that, to read just 30 minutes a week, 20% of people are more likely to have greater life satisfaction. 19% of readers say that reading stops them from feeling lonely. Similarly, non-readers are 28% more likely to report feelings of depression. So it's actually not just very good from an educational point of view, but actually very good from a mental health point of view as well.
Absolutely, and that is one of the reasons why I think it's sad that sometimes when children go to school, they have to be almost forced to read. Because if you force somebody to do anything, the chances are that as soon as you stop forcing, they're going to stop doing it. And that's why I commend the work of the Publishers Association through World Book Day and a lot of other initiatives to encourage children and young people to want to read, to encourage them to do something for fun because they like doing it, rather than because they've been told they have to do it and be able to recite it when they go back to school the next day. I did promise, Mr. Chair, that I would go back to the story about the school library, and I'm sorry I can't give any hints to the identities of the two people concerned, partly because of the sensitivity of some of the information that the lady provided me with. It's somebody that I know very well indeed in my constituency. I wish I could tell you what she's achieved and what she's delivered for other vulnerable people in and around Glenrothes over a number of years. But she's told me that she had a very troubled childhood. By the time she was at secondary school, the path of her life seemed to be set, and it wasn't a good path. She was one of the relatively few days she went to school. She happened to go past the school library, and she went in to see what was going on. And she got talking to the person who was a school librarian, somebody who I later got to know very, very well indeed. He sat down and talked to her and said that, so I heard her sad story, asked if she wanted a book. I don't think this girl had read a book in her life. So I gave her something simple and said, tell me what, take it away. You're only supposed to get it for a week, but take as long as you need to read through it. She brought it back 2 days later and finished it and asked for another one. And simply by pointing this young girl in the direction of books that would help her to see life from a different perspective, quite possibly it saved her life, because she may well have ended up with a lifestyle that would have led to an early death. Because of that almost chance encounter, because she was introduced to books when she needed something to show her an alternative path in life, she has continued for decades now to provide an enormously valuable service in my constituency. As I say, I wish I could identify the two individuals concerned, because the story says a lot about the school librarian at the time as well, that simply by being prepared to take a few minutes to help somebody who needed help, he literally, with the aid of some books, helped to turn around a life. Reading books of almost any kind is something that can change lives for the better. It's something that should be encouraged. It's not something we can force people to do, because that doesn't work. I consider myself lucky that I went to school in a day when every town had its lending library that was open all day, every day. Mine in Coatbridge was one of many that were built on the legacy of Andrew Carnegie, as a great many public lending libraries were. I fully appreciate the difficulties that library services have across the United Kingdom. They've had to change. They don't only do books in places for people to read just now, but it will be a sad, sad day if the library profession is pushed through financial constraints to significantly cut down any further, or to stop what was its original purpose in life, and a purpose in life which is not only life-enhancing, but sometimes can be life-saving, and that is encouraging people to take time in their busy day to sit down and lose themselves in a book.
A real pleasure to serve under you as chair today, Mr Pritchard, because I really do want to thank the Member for Cities of London and Westminster for bringing forward this debate to talk about World Book Day, and to honourable members who've made contributions this afternoon. It's been an incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking discussion amongst us. And it's one of those topics that does remind us why we got into politics, to ensure that all children get the best start in life. And I know my children have enjoyed many a World Book Day, getting stuck into stories and the occasional dressing up. I had, in thinking about the debate today, I had a little look through some old photos of costumes that we'd made over the years, of many of dubious creativity and quality, but the experience of sharing that together has always been fun, and that's why I really commend the work of the World Book Day charity, but also beyond World Book Day. There is something incredibly special, and I know honourable members have touched on it today, about reading with your child, rediscovering old favourites as an adult, as you do so, but also discovering new stories and new authors that they discover alongside with you. And anything that promotes that and encourages it is clearly to be hugely applauded. So, congratulations for bringing this debate here today. And we've heard so many examples of how World Book Day and reading in and of itself makes such a contribution to a person's life, but in particular to a child's education and their life chances. But we know there are huge challenges in this space as well. And last year, the annual literacy survey found the lowest levels of reading enjoyment since the survey began almost 20 years ago, with just 2 in 5 children saying they enjoy reading in their free time and only 28% saying that they read daily. I mean, these are incredibly worrying statistics, and they are a trend that we really need to work to reverse. For the million children in the UK who do not have a single book in their home, this is a fantastic opportunity to introduce or reintroduce reading into their lives. And it's especially true for the children in our poorest households, whose books can very often be seen as a luxury during a cost of living crisis. So ensuring that every child can choose a book with their £1 token is a really important step to igniting that passion for reading and making it accessible to all. Because we know that stories that you can immerse yourself in can help you think creatively, help you become interested in perhaps an entirely new topic that you may never have encountered before. And as many have highlighted in this debate, it is so important, but too many children are leaving school without those essential reading and writing skills. And without getting these basics right, children are being left behind. And these are often the children in the most challenging circumstances who have the least access to books, who are being hit the hardest. And that's why Labour in government would prioritise looking at a curriculum and assessment review to make sure that we do get that excellent foundation in the core subjects of reading, writing and maths to really get those basic building blocks right, but to also ensure that every child has access to a broad curriculum that reflects the issues and the diversities of our modern society, but also make sure that children from all backgrounds don't miss out on the things that for them will make school fun, like music, art, sport, drama, reading. And together this will ensure that children are able to develop life skills, like better communication skills, that we know are essential for their future. And so key to this for Labour is really resetting that relationship between government, between schools and between families, so that we can really, as a community, improve those literacy outcomes together. We know schools that have faced challenging budgets have had to make some difficult decisions, and many do not have designated funding for libraries. Libraries, whether they are in schools or in our communities, we know play such a vital role in encouraging children to read and making sure that every child has those resources. I have some of my most vivid childhood memories from the most youngest age of going to our local library and flicking through the ducats of books that are knee-high to a grasshopper, and just looking at what delights might have newly arrived in the library when the exchanges used to take place, and also the library buses that used to come round our school as well, and how excited I used to always be about books. And I just think it's so important that we all recognise, as we do today, how important that is for every child, and it shouldn't just be for those that have access and have that available to them. A lack of books in schools can further entrench inequality in access to reading, and we know the outcome of this on literacy outcomes. I know Michael Morpurgo, among others, has highlighted how crucial this is. And we also know that parents value it when children have access to books and have access to a good school library and a good local library, because it's a big pressure for parents as well to ensure that their children have access to the same books and reading and access to a love of reading that every other child may have as well. And we know that there is a gap in this support that's available, and many charities have filled in where they can. So the National Literary Trust and the Book Trust, we know the amazing work they do, and I pay tribute to it very much. But also, just to reflect on the strategy of the World Book Day charity, which says that their aim is more children from all backgrounds developing a lifelong habit of reading for pleasure, benefiting from the improved life chances that brings them. And I don't think we could sum up the purpose of this debate any better. But I might just quote the Minister himself on a recent Westminster Hall debate, that we cannot knock down barriers for children if we do not teach them to read well. And I couldn't agree more, and it should be the focus that we all have to improve these literacy outcomes for our children. That's why we, Labour, in government, would focus on this as part of our curriculum review to make sure we have those building blocks in place, why we would focus on hiring more teachers to fill the gaps left in our classrooms to make sure everybody can be supported to reach these aims. And it's why we would invest in early language and speech interventions to ensure that the very youngest of school children get the strongest start that they can. So I want to conclude by just paying tribute to the amazing work that World Book Day do year in, year out to encourage more children and their parents to take up reading, and thank the Honourable Member for giving us the opportunity to discuss such a positive thing today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard. It's a great pleasure to see you in the chair, and what a pleasure actually to be here today and take part in this. Is it a debate or just a discussion? It's felt more like a discussion, sometimes a discursive discussion, but a very good discussion. And I think we'll probably struggle to find, we would, even as politicians, struggle to find things to disagree on, because as the Honourable Lady who speaks for the opposition said, I mean, this is one of those things that brought so many of us into politics, both directly and indirectly, in terms of seeking ways to improve the life chances of those who are disadvantaged, but also wanting to open up the discovery of the world, including the literary world, to as many people as possible through the power of education. And so I congratulate my honourable friend, both for securing the debate, but also for having the foresight to apply for the debates. And thank everybody who has taken part, as well as our honourable friend from the two cities, our honourable friend from Stafford, my right honourable friend from Esher and Walton, of course, the honourable gentleman from beautiful County Down, my right honourable friend from South Staffordshire, and our honourable friend from Worcester, and the honourable gentleman from Glenrothes. Everybody has made, both those who spoke and those who intervened, have made, I thought, very interesting and insightful points. The honourable gentleman from Strangford, of course, reminded us of the variety of what we are talking about when we speak of books, although perhaps we think first of novels or children's books. When we're talking about World Book Day, it is also about biography and non-fiction, those eyewitness accounts. And the honourable gentleman from Glenrothes rightly mentioned the joy of discovering a new genre, something you weren't expecting, and the honourable lady opposite spoke of the joy of rediscovering when reading with your children or coming into contact with books that your children and their friends have. This hasn't really come up today, but I mean, I think one thing we might reflect on is, in a world where so much is about electronica and looking, well, that's a debate for another day. But it is wonderful to be celebrating the simplicity of a book, being able to lose yourself in a story, me time, if you like, which I would argue, Mr. Pritchard, is good for the soul. To come back to my honourable friend, I was very struck by what she told us about her time volunteering, and a very touching story, I might say. Also, she reminded us about the importance of book clubs, which is, of course, is a category which has grown significantly in recent times. I did not know about the Conservative Women MPs book club. She took us through an interesting journey through the literary chapters of her own life, as well as then talking through the rich literary heritage of the two cities. There was then, of course, a bit of a competitive spat with some other colleagues present from Staffordshire and Worcestershire about who was from where. I would just gently say, of course, I would never join in that type of competitiveness, but I would just mention that I represent East Hampshire, which is, of course, the undisputed home of Jane Austen. But to my honourable friend, although she, as she says, was a famous 5 girl, I was a Secret 7 boy. But I think I can say I agree with her on just about everything else. It was only a month ago we were last here discussing reading and the importance of reading, and it's a real pleasure to be able to be here today to recognise and celebrate World Book Day, and we all look forward to tomorrow. Mr Pritchard, the government wholeheartedly believes that all pupils deserve to be taught a knowledge-rich curriculum that promotes extensive reading, both for pleasure and for consuming information. The texts that our young people read play a significant part in their wider development, broadening their horizons and introducing them to new ideas and to different perspectives. Reading is a principal way, of course, to acquire knowledge about the world and language and vocabulary. And such knowledge then eases access to the entire rest of the curriculum. It really does underpin all education. So ensuring that pupils become engaged with reading is one of the most important ways to make a difference to their life chances. And evidence shows that reading for pleasure, as my honourable friend said, reading for pleasure is more important for children's educational development even than their family circumstances, their parents' educational background, or their income. That's why the government has introduced a range of measures to promote reading and improve literacy standards as part of that mission to level up education standards across England. We've strengthened the national curriculum to focus on reading, requiring pupils to study a range of books, poems and plays throughout their schooling to encourage a lifelong love of literature and an appreciation of our rich and varied literary heritage. But we recognise that for children to develop a love of books, we need to build a strong foundation in reading early on, as my right honourable friend from South Staffordshire rightly said. And that is why many of the measures this government has introduced support the effective teaching of reading right from the start. In 2021, we introduced landmark reforms in the early years foundation stage to improve early years outcomes for all children, particularly disadvantaged children. The reforms made to curriculum and assessment requirements focused on the critical areas that build the foundations for later success, including language development and reading. We've invested in the Nuffield Early Language Intervention, NELI or NELI, improving the speech and language skills of an estimated 150,000 children in reception classes. Over 320,000 primary school children have been screened to identify those with language development difficulties who will receive targeted language support. We also recently launched the Start for Life Little Moments Together home learning environment campaign in partnership with the Health Department. And that campaign, which follows the earlier Hungry Little Minds home learning environment campaign a few years ago, aims to increase rates of school readiness by alerting parents to the importance of the early years and their own critical role in their child's development for school readiness. Now, as my right honourable friend for Esher and Walton, among others, reminded us, to drive up the teaching of reading in primary schools, we've focused on high-quality, systematic, synthetic phonics teaching for every child, starting as soon as children join in reception. The evidence for phonics, Mr Pritchard, is indisputable. Phonics approaches have consistently been found to be effective in supporting younger readers to master the basics of reading, with an average impact of 4 months of additional progress compared to other approaches. And because of this, since 2010, we have placed phonics at the heart of the curriculum and introduced the phonics screening check in 2012 to assess pupils at the end of year 1. We've also incorporated phonics into the teachers' standards, the baseline of expectation for teachers' professional practice. We placed a greater focus on phonics and teaching of reading in Ofsted's framework and supported schools to choose good phonics programs by publishing a list of schemes validated by the department. Our focus on phonics is making a clear impact. When we introduced the phonics screening check in 2012, 58% of pupils in year 1 met the expected standard. By 2023, that figure was 79%. To support schools to embed phonics into their practice, we've funded the English Hubs programme since 2018, as my right honourable friend from South Staffordshire also mention. The programme has so far supported over 1,600 schools intensively, with a focus on helping those children making the slowest progress in reading, many of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds. It includes Chesterton English Hub, which offers support to primary schools in my honourable friend's constituency of the cities of London and Westminster. And the programme is having palpable impact. I saw this firsthand during a recent visit to the Knowledge Schools Trust English Hub last month. The programme's impact is also measurable. Schools supported intensively as partner schools by English Hubs outperformed non-partner schools by around 7 percentage points when comparing the change in Year 1 phonics screening check results between 2019 and 2022. English Hubs are also doing excellent work to develop reading for pleasure and early language. For example, in 2021, we rolled out the Transforming Schools Reading Culture programme, which was developed by Hub schools and sector experts to support reading for pleasure. Reaching around 600 schools last year, English Hubs are now into the third year of delivering this research-based continuing professional development programme, which trains teachers in schools across the country to ensure every pupil in their school develops a love of books. Of course, teachers play a vital and irreplaceable role in inspiring a love of literature, and the government has committed to supporting their professional development, including with the National Professional Qualification for Leading Literacy in October 2022. And as part of our Education Recovery Plan, we announced £184 million of funding to deliver 150,000 scholarships for all across the range of NPQs by the end of 2024. The NPQLL saw 3,064 funded starts in its first year, which was 8.6% of all funded NPQ starts. But the Hub programme can't reach every school, and the NPQ programme can't reach every single teacher. So to ensure that all teachers have clear guidance to support their reading teaching, we published the Reading Framework. Updated last year, the framework offers non-statutory guidance on best practice in the teaching of reading from reception up to Year 9. It recognises the importance of encouraging a love of reading, including the vital importance of pupil choice and access to a wide variety of books. It also includes helpful guidance for schools on how to organise the school library, book corner or book stock to make reading accessible and attractive to readers. And I wanted to thank the organisations and authors who work tirelessly to promote the importance of libraries. Alongside school libraries, public libraries have a strong offer to support children's development as readers beyond school and are part of the vital social and cultural infrastructure of the country. Mr Pritchard, our clear focus on reading is making an impact and has been recognised internationally. England came fourth in the 43 countries in the Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, better known by its acronym of PEARLS, fourth out of the 43 countries, and that is first among Western world nations. And I am hugely grateful to all of the primary school teachers, the teaching assistants, the other staff, and the parents, alongside the children, whose commitment to reading and embracing the phonics approach introduced by the government has made that possible. Indeed, the strongest predictor of Pearl's performance was the Year 1 phonics screening check mark, with higher marks predicting higher Pearl's scores. Mr Pritchard, I absolutely recognise strongly the important contribution of charities and organisations to promote the importance of reading for pleasure, and that very much includes our subject today of World Book Day. We should also mention the National Literary Trust overall, the Reading Agency, the Book Trust, and many more. World Book Day is a fantastic worldwide celebration of books and reading, marked in over 100 countries around the world. Their book and book token scheme, distributed through schools and early year settings, aims to appeal to all children, particularly those who need encouragement to read for pleasure, and I do want to thank them for the enormous contribution they make. The National Literacy Trust's National Storytelling Week took place last month. That too is a wonderful annual event celebrating the power of sharing stories. They provide excellent storytelling resources to early years practitioners, teachers and families to help bring the magic of storytelling to life and strengthen children's imaginations, critical thinking and literacy skills. So I, like everyone else here, I look forward to celebrating World Book Day. Some of us will be celebrating it tomorrow, some on Friday in the constituency. Some I think have probably already, and we are sort of all celebrating it together today. I'll be celebrating with the children and staff at High Hazels Academy in Sheffield, and also very excited that also will be there will be best-selling children's author and artist Rob Biddulph. I know the Secretary of State is also busy celebrating World Book Day this week. She attended the grand final of the BBC 500 Words competition last week, celebrating the finalists of one of the UK's most prestigious children's writing competitions. She also visited Hampton Gurney C of E Primary School yesterday to celebrate World Book Day with the children and staff there. Mr. Pritchard, last time I spoke in a debate in this hall, I concluded, as the Honourable Lady was kind enough to repeat, I concluded by saying that we cannot knock down barriers for children if we do not teach them to read well. I will reiterate that point today, as I know she does. The department is firmly committed to improving literacy for all pupils, ensuring that all children can benefit from high-quality teaching, giving them a solid base on which to build as they progress through school and beyond with a lifelong love of books.
Vicky Aiken to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. I'd like to thank everybody who took part in this celebration of World Book Day today. The member for Strangford pointed out that he's always supported my debates in the Westminster Hall, and I'm not sure how many I have left before I stand down from Parliament, but I do expect him to be attending each one. I do think that the member for Strangford did make a very, very important point about reading non-fiction. It's not just about fiction, it's about whatever book. And I do think it's important to remember that libraries are so important. And I was fascinated to hear from the member for Glenrothes about the perhaps the oldest library in the country, let alone the world perhaps. But both the members for Glenrothes and Strangford made the very important points about how about reading can change people's lives and how libraries can change people's lives. And it made me remember the visit I did several years ago when I was leader of Westminster Council to the pupil referral unit in Westminster, based in St John's Wood. And the head there wanted to extend the library. They had a very, very small library, and he wanted his children to embrace reading, hopefully to change their lives, like the constituent of the member for Glenrothes. So I was able to contact the person behind the Everyman's library, David Campbell, who donated so many books to the PRU, to the Pupil Referral Unit. I'm sure his donation, working with the head teacher, has hopefully changed some of the most vulnerable children we have in Westminster. I'd also like to thank the member for South Staffordshire, obviously a former Education Secretary who made a huge contribution to ensuring that children can read and do read, and supporting the schools and highlighting the utterly important area of phonics and introducing phonics at the earliest age to help children to read. Mr. Chairman, I will finally just finish by saying I want to thank and celebrate the World Book Day and the organisers behind it, the Publishers Association, but also thank the teachers and the teaching assistants and the parents who will be supporting their children tomorrow. And as we leave for this place, when we walk through the streets tomorrow, whether it's in our constituencies or whether it's in Westminster, we will see children walking to school in goodness knows how many different designs, whether it's attached to a book or not. I remember several times my children wore things that had nothing to do with a book. But it's so important that we celebrate this and we thank them, and just to ensure that parents do know it is World Book Day, because you don't want your children turning up for school in their school uniform when everybody else is in their World Book Day costume. So parents, remember it's tomorrow, but let's really celebrate reading. It can change people's lives for the better. It can open up worlds for children who are living in very, very different conditions. And I think that for as long as we can, we must have a World Book Day. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered World Book Day. As many people in that say aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. The sitting now suspended until 4 p.m. Order, order.